Welcome to the Drive-By Entrepreneur Podcast, which exists to bring current and compelling content to entrepreneurs and influencers of small to mid-sized organizations. I'm John Frank, fellow entrepreneur and the owner of Third Road Management. And with this podcast, we will connect with a variety of experienced and dynamic individuals to shed some light on both the art and science of entrepreneurship. Before we begin, I'd like to thank our sponsors. First, my very own Third Road Management, a company that brings fractional CFO services to small and mid-sized organizations by revolutionizing the CFO suite. We'd also like to thank Two Hound Red, a brewery and restaurant located in Glen Ellen, Illinois, that is focused on creating classic, innovative beer and food. And finally, we'd like to thank NWC Media, which provides inbound marketing technology, project workflow management, and efficiency consulting to organizations of varied sizes, who is also the producer of the Drive-By Entrepreneur Podcast. Angela Rose, welcome. It's such an honor to have you here. Excited to have you on the Drive-By Entrepreneur Podcast by Third Road Management. Great to see you.
Great to be here. Thank you so much.
Awesome. I always start out, this is episode 5, just so you know. And since we're new, I like to, continue to reiterate the mission of what we're trying to do here in the podcast, which is to bring current and compelling content to entrepreneurs and influencers of small to mid-sized organizations, right? And the idea is that we all have expertise in different areas, whether it be, leadership, or somebody might be a good banker, or somebody might be a good operator, somebody might be a good insurance broker, or an investment banker, whatever it is, right? There's people that have knowledge to share, right? That might be useful to leaders in of small to mid-sized organizations. So I wanted this to be a forum where we can bring in incredible people to share their expertise and hope it benefits others, down the road. So
Love that.
Great. That's why we're here. I normally let people introduce themselves, but I don't want you to be shy about some of your accomplishments. So I wanted to take the honor of introducing you. Number one is a friend for a really long time, but also a fellow Lake Park Lancer. So here we go, if you don't mind.
Please.
All right, good. So you are the founder and director of PAVE, which is Promoting Awareness, Victim Empowerment. You founded in 2001 as a student at the University of Wisconsin-Madison.
Got it.
PAVE is a national nonprofit that works to prevent sexual assault and heal survivors through social advocacy, prevention education, and survivor support. Now, that all sounded scripted, but I looked on your website, and you have trained more than 100,000 college students and over 10,000 professionals, chapters across the country and even across the globe. Your work, and I've seen some of this, by the way, great job. You've been featured on national media outlets, including CNN, The Today Show, the Oprah Winfrey Network, the 48 Hours special on CBS, I remember watching, in Time Magazine and other channels. You've received many, many, many awards, and I know that the number one award that you're most proud of is the Lake Park Education Foundation Distinguished Alumni Award. Maybe not, but I just wanted to plug that real quick. So, great job. It is an incredible honor to have you here with us.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that so much.
Yes. Okay, so we've known each other for a long time. I've been cheering you on, since the high school days, really. I know officially founded in 2001. But for those people that may be meeting you for the first time, tell us about your story and how that's connected to the founding of PAVE. And, I'd love for you to share it with your heart and passion, rather than me reading off a website or something like that. But I won't get into, any other stuff right now, but I want to give you the floor to share your story.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. Such a pleasure and so fun to see you and to spend this time together. So we just graduated from high school was when this went down, and I was working at Woodfield Shopping Mall, and I was actually on my way to a graduation party that you probably were going to be at. And so I was leaving my job. I asked my boss to get off of work early, and I love music. I was carrying a CD in my hand as I was walking to my car, And I had that spidey sense, that something was wrong. And I turned around behind me and someone was following me.
Mhm.
And at that moment, you feel, I mean, I felt personally like I should run. But then I thought to myself, oh, I don't want to make this guy feel bad. I was embarrassed. He had heard me singing. I could feel my cheeks turn red. And so I ignored that feeling. And I put my key into the lock, and then he grabbed me from behind and he kidnapped me in broad daylight. And it was almost like an out of body experience. And, he had me for several hours, and I kept trying to personalize myself, and remember details. He had taped my eyes shut, but I tried to remember everything that I could, the city sticker on the windshield of his car, the beaded seat cushion, everything that I could try and remember. And when he finally let me go hours later, I found myself in the police station in Schaumburg, and the detective didn't believe me and accused me of lying. And I thought to myself at that moment that here I've been through something literally out of a nightmare, and then to go to the police station expecting to be supported, believed. My parents were outside of the police station trying to see me, but they held me in this questioning room, and they wouldn't even let my parents see me. So out of that experience just came this passion and this fury to make sure that survivors were treated fairly, that people had the support. Because after my experience, John, so many people disclosed to me that this had happened to them too.
Mhm.
So after, I would say, a couple days later, we put so much pressure on the Schaumburg police to say this happened. I thought there should have been a piece of paper under every single store in that mall saying that there was a predator on the loose, because I told the police this was his first crime. So finally, they put these amazing detectives on the case, and they caught him. It was his parole officer that recognized him and explained to me that not only was he on parole for certain crimes, including kidnapping, sexual assault, but he was on parole for murdering a 15-year-old girl who looked exactly like me, some very similar facial features. So the first time that I ever came forward on the news with my story was just the back of my head. There's a lot of perceived shame around sexual violence, which we're trying to erase. There shouldn't be, it's not the survivor's fault that this happened, but I said, I know that there's other women that he's done this to. And he was only on parole for 6 months when he kidnapped me, and 4 other girls came forward that he had done this to.
Wow.
So after that, I just felt like, okay, I got to do something. So I found out the 15-year-old girl that he murdered, her name was Julie Angel. And I met the mother and the sister of this young woman and other of his previous victims. And we started a petition drive stating the need for tougher laws for repeat sex offenders. Pretty soon we had, what, 5, 6, 7,000 signatures. This was before the internet, so people were having to hand
Yeah.
sign these, right?
Right.
People had them in the,
Train
like,
stations.
exactly, train stations, medical office desks. I remember this woman who was 9 months pregnant, sweltering Chicago summer day, getting signatures outside of Jewel. I mean, it was so powerful to see the community really rallied around this. And I had an incredible support network from my family that so many survivors don't have. And so I worked with the former attorney general, and I was 17, and I saw as this legislation was being passed, like, people have the power to make a difference. And I was very inspired. But what really pushed me to create PAVE was that so many people had a story. Men, women, children of all ages, even people that were my grandparents' age would pull me aside and say, Angela, thank you for your voice, because this happened to me. But I've been silent about this my whole life. And I would always hear the same thing. Number one is that they had never told anyone, that they were so silenced. And number two, it was somebody that they knew and they trusted. So mine being a stranger assault, I thought, okay, well, when I was growing up, I was always taught to fear the stranger danger, but now I'm finding out that it's always somebody that we know and trust. So then I went away to college, went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison, looked for a group like PAVE to join, and there wasn't one. So I researched for months to find out what the missing piece was, and PAVE was born.
Uh, Amazing. I don't know if you remember this, but I wanted to um, go back. That I don't know if you remember. I worked at Field of Dreams in the mall, and
At
you
Jordan
worked
Marie,
at
yes.
the candy
Little,
place,
it
or
was a little children's, like a baby's clothes store, but
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I remember it being right around graduation,
yeah,
and when that happened, and I was just like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe that happened. And then I think because of the summer and whatever, we just, you went to college and I went to
right.
college, and we didn't reconnect. And then I heard about, you starting this organization. I'm like, what's she doing? And I just was incredibly proud of you then, and continue to be proud of you now, that, you turned your pain into passion. And, it's remarkable. I want to commend you on it. We're going to talk more about it, but I don't know, just really proud of you.
Thank
So
you, John. I appreciate that so much.
thank you for following that. I think for today, kind of leads into thematically a couple of things about your story that, have resonated with me then and continue to resonate with me. Um, leading with passion, right? Leading with commitment, and then leading through adversity. Because it's easy to skip over the adversity. And you've already mentioned a big piece of that, which is when everything initially happened, people were saying, I don't believe you.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I'm sure that that's not the only adversity that you've gone through for an extended period of time here. So I want to talk about passion, because, your story is your story, and it's unique. And I want to tap into that a little bit. And your story may create passion in other people. And my hope would be that this forum is a place where people can get inspired to maybe even support you, or maybe start their own organization that, is on a similar effort as you are. But maybe somebody else has a seed of passion inside them for something else, right? And I don't know, I just hope that, hearing you and your story and you following your journey, will produce passion in other people. So I'm excited about that. So, all right. So as it pertains to you, you converted a significant amount of pain into your passion. So that drive at the beginning, right? What did that feel like, right? Like, I'm trying to put myself in that situation, right? And to feel in that room like you weren't supported in any way, people didn't believe you, all that kind of stuff. Like, how did that create passion, in you in that moment? I'm sure it converted over a period of time, but like, talk to me about the way that felt and then how you kind of came out through that.
That's a great question. I think for me, it was really anger, to be honest with you. In the beginning, I just remember clenching my fist. There was nothing being done on my case. The detective looked at me from across that table and said, are you in an abusive relationship? Does your boyfriend hit you? Because sometimes girls get themselves into situations so condescending. His arms were closed. Body language means so much. And so his arms were closed. His tone was just so disrespectful. And I was so mad. I just remember feeling just this rage inside of me, and my fists were clenched, and I stood up and I walked out of that police station because there was nothing being done that night. They didn't take evidence. They didn't take my clothes. When they took pictures, because he had bound my hands behind my back, the pictures of my lacerated wrists were so overexposed they couldn't even use them in court. That the detective was so convinced that I had made this up. And I just went home feeling so angry. And then my grandma, my guardian angel, called me the next day and said, Angela, this happened to you for a reason, and you need to fight. And she said, you are not a victim, you're a survivor. And now I consider myself a thriver. It's that journey of healing, but you don't do it on your own. I think so many people, whether it be in business or healing from a life circumstance, surrounding yourself with people, finding mentors. And that's what I had to do in college when I did feel helpless and I wanted to make a difference. And so when I went away to college, I looked for a group, like I mentioned, like a PAVE, and there wasn't anything. So I interviewed teachers, politicians, students, other organizations, trying to find out what's the missing piece. I didn't want to reinvent the wheel or step on anybody's toes. I wanted to create something meaningful. And so really putting pause and researching for, I think it was about 3 or 4 months, doing a lot of interviews with folks to say, okay, what can I do to make something meaningful, to make a difference? And so what I realized what was missing was an organization that focused on prevention for all gender identities, for men and women, that we took a positive approach at talking about consent and healthy relationships, but also something that helps survivors to thrive after trauma in a very holistic way, mind, body, soul. That was missing. And so I think in any business, what can you iterate on? What can you find out that's the missing piece? What's missing in the world? And just get out there and do it. But you don't have to do it alone. Finding great mentors, and I had an amazing student group to help me create PAVE. And at our first meeting, I was hoping for like a dozen people to come, and we had over 80 people come.
Wow.
So I knew that we were onto something.
That's amazing. Well, and I'm sure over the course of time, just given the nature of, I mean, you're multifaceted, right? So you're prevention, but you're also, all the way through to empowerment, right?
Yes.
And in between there are experts all along the way, from lawyers to strategists to people that put together all the, I'm just creating this in my head here, but all the training materials, whether it be video, audio, something visual. You have people that are doing the work. You have, advocates, out there to breaking new ground,
That's
creating
right.
new ways for you guys to introduce this type of curriculum too. I mean, the number of people along the way that have been part of this journey has to be astounding relative to the initial 80 people that, were part of it at the beginning.
I like to think about it like the butterfly effect, right? It's like if you as a business like kind of impact one person, then it just kind of flutters. And so all of a sudden, other college chapters wanted to start a PAVE at their school. And so we had to pause and say, okay, so this has worked for us. How do we create basically a how-to manual, how to really grow and scale? And, I think one important piece for any business is knowing what you're good at
Mm.
and knowing what you're not, knowing what you like, knowing what you don't like, because every person is not good at everything. So finding people around you that you can kind of delegate to and to work with that has different skill sets than you do has been very, very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Now, in addition to doing this with an incredible amount of passion, you've also been committed to it for a very long time. And I know for me personally, well, first of all, it's been 25 years,
5 years.
25 years
Mm.
that you've been out on the forefront of this as a leader, in your own household, but in your own community, but also nationally and internationally, which is crazy. And it's incredible. But 25 years is not a short window of time to stay committed to something, right? Um, I mean, and now life is even more complicated, right? You have a husband, you have children, you have all the things like I do working on you all the time, right? So, in terms of, staying committed, obviously, the mission and the vision of the organization are at the forefront, right? But what has helped you maintain that commitment, right? Because somewhere along the way, somebody's going to come along, you know, let's say this episode, hopefully, right, that is doing some kind of great work, right? And they want to quit,
Right. Been
right?
there.
And I'm sure that you have been there.
Been there.
Yeah.
I
I'm
think
sure it's not one time. I'm sure it's a couple of
I
times.
think anytime as an entrepreneur or business owner, you fall on your face, you learn a lesson. And that's so my dad was an entrepreneur and he always told me that failure is inevitable and it's a good thing because you learn from your mistakes. But I've given up so many times almost on PAVE, but then you hear that inner voice saying, keep going.
Mhm.
And so I would say a couple things around commitment is also knowing when you feel like you're burning out. You can't pour from an empty cup. So I'm a
Mhm.
big proponent for self-care,
Mhm.
whatever that looks like, but really looking at, when people throw around this word of self-care as like, it's kind of buzzword. But when you look at like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, are you getting enough sleep? Are you eating well? Like for me, I had a little bit of a kind of going into my 40s, you feel invincible. You don't think that you're going to have any health issues. And a couple years ago, I started to feel really cloudy and weird. And I realized that my blood pressure was really low, like 78 over 40. So I went to the doctor and what we found out after me going to a cardiologist in a room full of people twice my age was that I wasn't sleeping enough and I wasn't drinking enough water.
Hmm.
Small little things can really make an impact. So in terms of staying committed, you have got to take care of yourself. It's so important to fill your cup in order to be able to pour into your business, pour into the world. Also, tech boundaries are really important for our family. So we don't have phones at the dinner table, making sure that we have those boundaries. My husband is in tech and he's a great example for me where, when he is with our kids, he is with our kids. He has a pretty amazing job at Meta, but he stays very focused. When he's with the family, he's not checking his work email, he is there. And that makes such a difference.
Hmm.
So I think in terms of staying committed, making sure you've got those boundaries on your life, taking care of yourself and creating a great routine. Like if I don't have my little yoga practice in the morning, I feel very out of sorts. So it's knowing what sets your soul on fire, following through and having creative outlets too. So
Yeah.
yeah.
What are some of the other, you mentioned yoga,
Mm-hmm.
creative outlets. I know there's a little music
Little
in your life.
music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, what are some other, outlets that you've explored? I mean, it's been 25 years,
25
right?
years. Yeah.
You know,
Nature is amazing.
nature. Yeah.
Therapy. Like it took me, I'm Italian. And so coming up in an Italian household, like we were never really celebrated for asking for help, right? So it's like you pick yourself up by your bootstraps and you make it happen. And so it took me 8 years to go to therapy.
Mm.
And for For somebody like me, I just always thought like no matter what happens in my life, I will make it happen. And what I realize is that it's not a sign of weakness to ask for professional help. It's actually a big sign of strength. So it took me a long time to get professional help to really process it. And what I realized was that I had been living with this boulder on my chest that I didn't even know was there. And then when I did, there's a therapy called EMDR, which stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. But I felt this freedom after this experience, of this therapy. And so there's no shame in that. So getting great coaches, whether that be life coaches, executive business coaches, therapists, whatever it is that you can create, this kind of bubble around yourself of support is so, so profound.
That's great. And I mean, because of that level of commitment, I mean, PAVE has grown now. I mentioned some of the statistics, um, earlier on, but tell me about sort of where it's at and what is the big vision,
The
right?
big vision is
Is
culture
it
change
endless?
and getting us out of business. That's
Yeah.
my goal. I would love for a world that PAVE doesn't exist. But I look at my children and it's really creating a better world for them. It's like when we were growing up, there wasn't a lot of consent education in schools or bystander intervention or supporting survivors. I had a lot of, friends in high school that had no idea how to support me after this experience because it's not their fault, but we don't teach them what to say or do if somebody discloses. So my grand vision is culture change, creating a consent culture where respect and consent is the norm. You don't see a lot of that in Hollywood. So working with Hollywood to really create this shift and also for survivors to be supported, to be celebrated, to use their voices because traditionally when people speak out, especially about sexual violence or domestic violence, oftentimes people don't know what to say or do. So they're kind of even well-meaning loved ones say things sometimes that are very either triggering or victim blaming.
Yeah.
Like even in court, they asked me what I was wearing. It's like, should that make a difference? Like I was wearing a little pantsuit, but if I was wearing a miniskirt, should that make a difference? Absolutely not. So really changing the culture to support survivors, create a consent culture. So the ways that we're doing that is we're developing right now, and I'm so excited to launch our new high school program where it's a video-based curriculum with the top experts in the country that have vetted this, talking about consent, but cyber safety, because there's a lot of issues with obviously in our generation, we didn't have cell
Yeah.
phones back in the day. It's hard for teens to even imagine a world without cell phones, but there was such a time. And so cyber safety is a huge issue right now for kids, and not only for potential predators online, but the way that teens communicate online with each other. We're seeing a big increase in suicide among
Yeah.
teens and tweens. And so really passionate about, anti-bullying, supporting survivors, healthy relationships between not just, boyfriend, girlfriend, or dating, but even between friends, girlfriends, guy friends. What does that look like to really have a healthy relationship with great communication? And, and then on the supporting survivor side, having a great hub. We are developing the nation's leading hub to support survivors of human trafficking, domestic violence, and sexual abuse. It's called survivors.org. So it exists right now, but we just got our first grant from the federal government, from the US Department of Justice to make this what we know it can be. So we're really excited about that. And just continuing to do the work. And I think grassroots is so powerful, finding ways to plug into the community. I'm so excited to let you know that we're now working with Lake Park. We've got all of the classes, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, are going to be going through a PAVE assembly
Oh,
in the
that's awesome.
spring and bringing in our curriculum. And it can't be one and done. The way that we work with schools, John, is that we make sure that the teachers and the parents are educated first before we even think about educating the students, because we want to make sure that parents and teachers know what to say or do if somebody discloses. So really excited that it can't just be one and done. We're going to create like little PAVE clubs all around the country. So we've got the chapters at colleges, but we're finding increasingly high schools want to get involved. So it's exciting. So it's also, as a business person, continuing to iterate, right?
Yep.
Can't stay stagnant. You got to continue to iterate and to go with the flow.
Yep. I mean, the victim empowerment, side, definitely, resonates with me because I feel like I'd be one of those people that wouldn't know what to say.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Wouldn't know what to do. And so, teaching things on the front end, right? And then being there on the back end as a resource, just because people are like, I don't know where to go. You know what I mean? They might, look to a counselor or something like that. But even then they might say, well, I can get you a counselor or something like that. But what do I do? How am I supposed to interact? And yeah, I think that all the work that you're doing in that regard on the prevention side, and then on the other side is just incredible.
Thank you so much. And
Yeah,
just a little plug for using technology. We've now developed PAVE University where parents and teachers and students can go into PAVE U for free. And we have courses on survivor support and consent and bystander intervention. And we're going to continue to add different courses to this. So again, just iterating and using and leveraging technology to be able to, try and reach as many people as possible.
that's great. Somewhat connected to, the commitment over a long period of time, and I've touched on this, which is leading through adversity. And even that first point of adversity with, like, it's easy for me to sit here and say, I cannot believe that that happened. Meaning like you were in there and they were like, yeah, no, that didn't happen. And they were just totally dismissive of you. Like, why in the world would anybody do that? You know what I mean?
Right.
And so like, right, like you start there, like that's a huge thing. And you've already said that people have come forward and more victims, not only of that individual, but just thousands and thousands and thousands and that have had this similar experience, right? So it starts there, leading through that part of the adversity. I mean, do you feel like that's better now than what it was then?
We sure hope it is. We do a lot of law enforcement training, but unfortunately, all over the country, we still hear of survivors that are very re-traumatized when they try and report. And that's why sexual assault is the most underreported crime in the country. So we are trying to get the report rates up, especially one of the programs for PAVE that I'm really passionate about is we have a support dog program. So we are working with communities, police stations to get these beautiful support dogs, not only to help law enforcement officers, but to bring them into the room when survivors report. If I had a support dog, it would help so much, lowers, all of our, like the heart rate goes down. You just have this feelings of, you get the dopamine, it helps you relax. And so it's been really remarkable to try and use support animals in the reporting process. So do I think it's getting better? Slowly. Do we still have a lot of work to do? Absolutely.
What are some of the other obstacles along your journey? I mean, 25 years, right? So I mean, I know I could probably name a few, like funding and things like that. But when you think about the mountains that you've had to sort of ascend, and maybe they're not totally solved, like the the one that we talked about. But when you looked at them, you're like, holy cow, that is a
big one,
a big hill to climb. Or just times that you got struck down and you needed to pick yourself back up. What were some of those things that you've gone through over that 25-year period?
I think the work-life balance, absolutely. So as I was building this, of course, I had to fund my life. So, with PAVE, it was a passion project for a long time that I wasn't getting any sort of income from. So my first job out of college was in real estate, so was able to be self-employed and, went on to manage. I had a staff or an office. I managed 200 agents of Keller Williams. But during that time, PAVE was growing. I was living in DC. We were working with the White House. We were working with Congress for the bipartisan task force to end sexual violence in Congress. And so it was just trying to juggle all these balls without letting anything fall and trying to plan a wedding. And then my dad got really sick and he was given 8 months to live and he died in 3 weeks. And so all of these things were happening. And I thought to myself, okay, I got to press pause. And even though that job at Keller Williams as the team leader CEO was my dream job, I realized in my heart of hearts that I had to let something go. And so family came first. And then, this passion of mine. So I quit my job, which was very hard to do, but to really take PAVE to the next level. And so for me, really making that decision to make this work no matter what. And then we started to look at what are other organizations doing, taking time to press pause, to write the grants that we knew we needed to write. We were focused so much on the programming and finding ways to use social entrepreneurialism to fund the business. So developing a speakers bureau to be able to help fund PAVE and finding different ways where we can use our programming to really bring in donations. And so, I think for me, just the potential burnout at that moment was definitely a huge, form of adversity at that moment because there was just so many life things happening, especially with, my father passing away and he was my greatest cheerleader. That was a really tough thing. So I know he's been looking down and helping guide this. But I think another thing was I put so much in my early 20s of my personal finances into this, and basically like practically going bankrupt because I was just putting so much in because I wasn't asking for help. People want to give to causes they believe in. And so again, pressing pause, developing a donor packet, asking for help. But for me, as an entrepreneur with a lot of fire, you just feel like you can do everything yourself.
Right.
You don't have to. There's people that want to help you. There's people around you that want to lift you up and support you. So, I mean, I would stay up until 4 in the morning. And especially as a mom, when I first, had Ari, my daughter, I would be up sometimes until 4 in the morning working, waking up at 6 in the morning to care for my kid. I'm like, you can't survive on 2 hours sleep. So learning that you have to take care of yourself, mind, body, and soul, especially if you're preaching it. So I'm like around the country preaching like the fact that you have to take care of yourself. It wasn't really living it myself. So really practicing what you preach is important, I think, as a business owner, and realizing that you don't have to do it alone.
Right. Yeah, it's so important. I mean, even my, journey was like that. When I left my job, the security of all the financial stuff,
Right.
to go work in the nonprofit space, it felt like, holy cow, like, what am I doing? Right. It
Right.
felt very insecure. We had just had our third child. My wife is extremely supportive. We sold our house, moved into a smaller one, all that kind of stuff. But when you're following what you're supposed to be doing, it makes it all worthwhile.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
And having a vision, like knowing what it is that you want. And I think, I wrote a book called Hope, Healing, and Happiness, Going Inward to Transform Your Life. And a part of it is acting as if you already have it. Like whatever it is that you want to be, do, have, really act like you already have it. Like Steven Spielberg, I love that example where he was a teenager, found a closet on set in the studio, and he just made that, put his name on it, put the star on it, and he would start just going to work every day, even though he wasn't getting paid. But he acted as if he had already what he wanted to be. And look at what happened. He's, everybody knows that name. And so I think you need to act as if you already have. But I really believe in affirmations too, and writing down your affirmation, what it is that you already have. So for me, when I even was manifesting a husband, I was like, okay, I'm ready to settle down, life and God. Like I'm ready to settle down. And I've always wanted to be a mom. And so I wrote on I really researched like, what is a healthy relationship as I was, training for PAVE, and what does that look like for me as an adult? Like I knew what it was for the dating life and for teens. We did a lot of work in schools, but here I am in my 30s, like, okay, I'm ready to settle down. So I put on a little Post-it note. I'm like, I am in a healthy relationship with great communication and dance parties in the kitchen. And I put it all over my house. And I was very good friends with Ryan before we started dating. And I looked at him after I put these affirmations. I was like, oh, we were like best friends. I'm like, maybe it's you. And here we are happily ever after. So knowing what it is that you want, I think is so important, and acting like you already have it.
Amazing. Love it. Love it. Well, it is Domestic Violence Awareness Month.
Yes.
Which is unplanned on my part. But I was so happy that the timing worked out right.
Yeah.
It's in October. Definitely hoping to get this out, in this month, and I'm sure it'll be out, very soon. Let's put it that way. But talk to me a little bit about Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and I'd love for you to hit on just how that started, what areas of support there might be. I'd love for you to even talk into ways that people can be supportive of PAVE.
Yeah.
But then if there's other ways that people can be supportive, I'd love to just kind of open it up. So,
Sure.
yeah.
Well, October is National Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and this has been something it's been for years, but it hasn't really gotten the oomph that I'd love it to. If you saw, like, October is also Breast Cancer Awareness Month, very important. But a lot of times you'll see the NFL wearing pink. I would love for the NFL to talk more about domestic violence. We're getting there. We're working with a former NFL player to really bring this conversation into the minds and hearts of athletes, professional all the way down. So I think it's important for any person dating on up to understand what's the difference between a healthy and an unhealthy relationship. And oftentimes for teens, there's a lot of unhealthy behaviors that look like love for them. So it's excessive texting, trying to, really pull you away from friends and family and isolate you. finding out where you are at all times. So to a teenager, they might think, oh, well, this person loves me. They want to know where I'm at all times. They want to, spend as much time with me as possible. But in essence, sometimes that could be an unhealthy relationship because you're feeling guilt when you spend time with friends and family. That isolation can be a
Yeah.
tactic. So it doesn't always have to be physical violence for it to be an emotionally abusive situation. So understanding the difference is really important. We have a lot of information on our website at shatteringthesilence.org. And all of our social media, we have a big kind of push for Domestic Violence Awareness Month at PAVE Info, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. Interact with us, follow us, and donate to the cause. You could become a PAVE member every single month, as little as $5. That's what you spend on a latte, and that could really do wonders at supporting the cause. And even in your own life, looking at toxic people and relationships and letting them go sometimes with grace, and that's okay, whatever. And that could even be friendships, but really looking at your life and seeing like what is bringing you joy, surround yourself with people that uplift you and that, you feel great to be around, because sometimes we're in relationships in our lives where it just is toxic, and it's hard for us to let it go because it's just such a part of who we think that our life is, what we identify with. But it's okay to let toxic people go, even if it's family members. Let them go with grace and create those boundaries. So it's just so important that we can choose to create a life of meaning and of purpose surrounded by people that bring us joy.
Very, very good. If you look back on 25 years worth of work, um, I'm sure there have been times that you get all the feels, right? And you feel like, it's all been worth it,
Yeah.
right? Are there any of those times that you can sort of like point to and be like, hey, that, I remember being there on that day, on that time, anything like that?
Absolutely. There's a couple. The one that comes to mind is a very recent one, actually. We put together a really beautiful awards event in Hollywood a couple of weeks ago, almost exactly a month ago now. And we honored 20 amazing survivors, Cosby survivors, Weinstein survivors, Larry Nassar survivors. We have never had these amazing warriors in one room together. And it was like the room was vibrating.
Mm.
But what really just struck my soul was, of course, all of these people talking about how PAVE supported them through the process, which was powerful. But then we brought up a young girl who at the time was 17 years old, had raised $1,700 for her 17th birthday because she was supported by PAVE. Her stepdad, was her perpetrator. And on the mic, she said, PAVE saves her life.
Mm.
And it's those moments, because when you don't get support from your family, when you don't get support from people, and again, it's not the family's fault. Well-meaning loved ones, oftentimes, there's a level of feeling this guilt as a non-offending family member, possibly, that you wish that you could have protected your child. So a lot of times they say very victim-blaming things because they just want it to go away. So hearing that like PAVE has saved people's lives is just amazing. There's a young woman named Delaney Henderson who we helped support after she was assaulted in high school. She had tried to end her life twice. And now when PAVE got involved with her life, now she is thriving. I mentored her. Now she's a successful real estate agent. She has an amazing life. And so just those moments of looking at the individual hearts and lives that we've impacted, incredible. The other moment for me that really stood out was I had just given birth to my daughter, and it was in Arlington, Virginia. And I got an invitation to then Vice President Biden's house. And it was the day after I got out of the hospital giving birth to Ari. I was at the Vice President's house. I was a hot mess,
Yeah.
you're a man, but I'm sure you've seen your wife give birth. It is not an easy feat.
No.
And I was able to be there, and it was an event to support VAWA, the Violence Against Women Act, and it was amazing. It was one of those moments where you look at your life and be like, wow, as a woman, we are warriors. We just pushed out a 7.5-pound baby, and now you're like shaking the hand of the vice president. Like, it was amazing. So, my life has moved very fast in the past 25 years. So now I'm really excited that we're just growing to be able to have a team. Now we've got a staff of 5 that I can trust and that I can take some time more for me to work on my second book. That's more my memoir of like, really reliving these experiences. Ari was, I think, 6 months old. I had no family around. I was living in Virginia and I got asked to speak at Oxford. So I had no one to care for my child. My husband was on the road 100% travel. So I left her in the care of some family friends, but that was tough.
Yeah.
All the time she would be on the road with me, coast to coast as I would speak when she was young. But going over the pond. So, those moments where, you have to leave your 6-month-old baby, but you know that it's for the greater good. And I want to make the world a better place for my kids, for
Yep.
both my son and my daughter.
Yep.
So it's been a labor of love for
Well,
25 years.
and setting a good example as, both a leader and mom. And, my wife is a full-time leader and mom in our house. And, I always say she'd be the first person I hired to do anything and everything. But I see that in her at times, is that she feels as though she needs to, you know, do one or the other, right? And, being able to like lead through that, lead with passion, know you have a support system in place is really important. But
Giving yourself grace that it doesn't all have to be done today.
yes,
Give yourself, I think humans were very judgmental characters. And so it's just nice to like give yourself grace.
give yourself some space. Well, here on the Drive-By Entrepreneur podcast by Third Road Management, we have 3 final questions. We haven't switched them up yet. We will eventually.
Okay.
But they're just kind of fun and whimsical. And the first one is your favorite podcast. And I always say it's besides this one. Are there podcasts that you enjoy? If you're like, hey, I'm not really a podcaster, maybe a book or an audiobook or anything like that that you lean into when it comes to content and fun stuff.
I just listened to an audiobook that completely transformed my life, and it's called Raising Good Humans.
Ooh.
And it completely shifted my kind of the way that I've seen parenting, the way that I've experienced being a mom. And it completely shifted everything, and I feel like a different person. So Raising Good Humans has completely transformed my life.
Raising Good Humans. And do you know who it's by chance? I'm sure there's only one,
But it's very research-based, which I love.
Okay.
And I think positive parenting, it's just been such a eye-opening experience. And it's really about looking at yourself and how do you show up? So
Right.
it's like when your kids are acting out, you really look inward first. So,
Right.
it's been a challenge, having kids, especially during the pandemic, because they weren't in school. So it's like I'm teaching them, but I'm still running this, this company. And it was such a very difficult time for nonprofits because especially for PAVE, so many survivors are being very triggered, and the amount of domestic violence and child abuse, those rates were skyrocketing. So they saw me on my phone a lot. And so it's like, how are you showing up? And oftentimes, if you really look at yourself and find ways that you can calm down and like talk about your feelings, helps them talk about theirs. So it's been really cool to do these exercises, and I'm seeing like a complete difference in the way that my daughter and I interact. It's been awesome.
So you were working in the commercial or in real estate, I should say,
Yes.
and doing PAVE. If you weren't doing PAVE, do you think you'd be doing real estate, or do you think you'd be doing like I could totally see you being a counselor or a psychologist or a psychiatrist or anything along those lines, because you're clearly passionate about the inner work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Healthy relationships you've mentioned, whatever. I don't want to like say that's what you should be doing if you weren't doing PAVE, but like what do you think you would be doing if you think you'd be doing the real estate stuff?
Well, the real estate thing, I always feel like I'm kind of a life coach in that way. Like, and I am actually excited because on the side, I am working on starting my own coaching business, which I'm excited about. Heard it here first. I haven't announced that yet, but I'm really excited about that. But really being a real estate agent, especially when you're working with somebody, that's their biggest life purchase. And a lot of it is psychology. A lot of it is coaching. And so I kind of bring a lot of like that coaching aspect into the real estate. I love people, and I love customer service. And so, so real estate, I still keep that for friends and family, people that I know, by referral and things. But coaching and really helping people to be all that they were meant to be, and to stop thinking small, and to really think big, and to not stop until you get there.
Yep. Well, you've always been the same person in that way. I always remember you the exact same way, even back to the high school days, in terms of being an advocate for people and stuff like that. So, not surprising. Second question is best concert you've ever been to, and I will put a little asterisk on this one because new news to me relative to our days knowing each other a while back. You are a musician. When did you pick it up? How'd you pick it up?
picked it up out of the need, really. So when I was in my early 20s, I just felt this need to get it out of me, whatever those feelings are. And so I started playing guitar. And then I filmed, I think I was 21 or 22. We filmed our first documentary and we needed a theme song, and it was very expensive to license the music. So I wrote the theme song and performed it. I was like, well, this is great. I can get in the studio. We can, somebody volunteered their time to cut the track, and then we have this free soundtrack. I'm like, this is great. So then I started to do a little bit of the open mic circuit. I'm like, this is great because for me, music is like a spiritual experience. And so when you ask about, concerts, so absolutely Dave Matthews Band, we share. I've seen Dave plenty of times, but my favorite concert of all time was Bob Seger. Classic rock is in my soul. My parents, my mom used to work at a record shop when she was in high school that my grandparents owned in Franklin Park. And so I inherited their classic rock record collection. So when I saw Bob Seger, I literally cried. I'm like, I wanted to see him for so long. It was his final tour and just played all the songs, all the feels. It was just amazing. And I'm like, I just can't believe I'm like sobbing right now. It was so great. I told my husband, I was like, we will meet him. And he was like, okay, yeah, fine. I'm like, no, we're going to meet Bob Seger. Because in my early 20s, I also dabbled in journalism I used to work for Think MTV. Anyway, but I just told Ryan, I was like, I don't know how this is going to happen, but it's going to happen. So he wasn't taking any interviews, tried to pull that journalist card, wasn't happening. The very next morning, we ended up staying in the same hotel.
Get out of here.
There he is at breakfast, and I was pregnant with my son. So he gave me a little belly rub. So I feel like Jackson, my son, is going to maybe be some famous musician. Who knows? But it was wild. So
that is, you literally broke the old records off the shelf, I guess. Yeah, in that case, yeah. Yeah, there you go. Bam. I think that's called a dad joke at our age.
I love it.
But also on the musical front, you had some things that we were talking about just before that is very exciting. I know details are still getting ironed out.
Details are being ironed out, but my vision has always been creating some type of a musical concert, educational and entertainment experience for families to come together. There's been very passionate about cancer. That's what, killed my dad, but there's been Stand Up to Cancer, all these different wonderfully amazing causes. There has never been a concert to shatter the silence of sexual and domestic violence. So kind of put this out there. We've been working with some folks in Hollywood to create something that would be streaming this April. So all I'm going to say is stay tuned, but we're working with some pretty big names. And, media is never the goal, but it's a very important tool to get to the goal, right? The goal is social change. The tool to get there is through celebrity engagement, multimedia. And so all I'm going to say is stay tuned. It's going to be fun to see what happens.
All right, please do. I'd be happy to do what I can to promote that for you. Last question is a place that you've been that everybody should visit one time.
Well, as I mentioned, I used to live in Arlington, Virginia. So being in DC, the history there, I think I lived kitty corner from Arlington National Cemetery and just taking walks through there and just seeing so many men and women that have died for our country. I have just felt so passionate about that. And plus for PAVE, we do a lot of work also with military families and working with military sexual trauma and prevention. So I've always had a deep passion for military service members. So I would really say either Arlington National Cemetery, but also seeing the national monuments. So have you been to DC?
Our common friend that lives out that way, last year actually went to a Dave Matthews concert.
Yes.
In down 3 hours away from that area. But we went to the show, we stayed there. That was my first time flying into DC and, driving along,
you see the monuments
you see the monuments and everything.
And the history.
We didn't stay there, unfortunately. So I still need to go and like officially visit because we went to Virginia Beach, but for the show, but I really want to go there, but it was just amazing even seeing it from a distance.
It'd be great to take the kids, and now that they have the MLK, like there's just so many different wonderful pieces of history. So I would say definitely the National Mall, so powerful.
Yeah, it's definitely, even from a distance, it gives you a little bit of that just like awe factor of like, it's easy to live in the United States, for example, and especially you're in the Midwest. and just think that like, oh, this is the stuff I read about in history books or whatever, but to like
Experience it.
experience it and see it and all that kind of stuff firsthand.
Yeah, and I think so
Love it.
many people take this country for granted. Like I remember working internationally with a journalist with the United Arab Emirates, and she said, we would love to talk about PAVE, but I have to get permission.
Mm,
They don't have freedom of the press. And that was one of my first moments to realize, wow, like we have so many amazing freedoms here that we take for granted. And they wouldn't allow my story or PAVE to be published in their women's magazine, basically. So I think it's important for people to, to get outside their comfort zone and also travel internationally. When I went to India and other countries where it's so sobering for us to just appreciate cultures, but also the freedoms that we have to not take those for granted.
awesome. Well, we will be sure to include details on how to support you and PAVE in any comments before this goes out via its various channels. But before we end, I just want to say thank you again for being here. You're an inspiration. You have been for a long time. I told you when I contacted you that I've been cheering you on from afar for a very, very long time. So honored to have you on here. You're a hero. Keep doing the great work you're doing, and very, very grateful for you being on here today.
Thank you so much for everything. Appreciate you.
All right, Angela Rose.
Thank you.
All right.